Hello everyone. Since this is either a highlight, a standalone book, or the first episode in a series, I'm jumping in to remind you what the rules are for this podcast. First rule is, no real people stories. That means that any details from our own lives are merely anecdotal, we do not read books about real people, and we are not reading historical fiction. The second rule is that we are basing our analyses off of how the author treats characters and what they put them through. We are not judging the accuracy of the trauma, the accuracy of any actual conditions that may be portrayed, nor the authenticity of a character's reaction to that trauma or that particular condition. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come solely from personal experience. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all audiences. Please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers.
This week we are reviewing the first book of Paksenarrion trilogy, The Sheepfarmer's Daughter. In this book, Pax runs away to become a soldier and discovers that the life of a soldier is not what she dreamed it to be, but it is what she wanted. Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and welcome to Books That Burn, your fortnightly book review podcast. Alright, for factions, we have Paksenarrion, we have Duke Phelan and the company, we have Sabin, Effa, Canna, and some other friends of Paksenarrion. We have Stammel and other various training officers and superiors. We have Steffi, Corin, and Jens. We have the Honey Cat and his company. And then we have various other mercenaries and companies.
So, we are talking about Cal Halverick, and we're almost talking more about the aftermath of his trauma than we are his actual trauma, I want to say.
Well, no, because we get before it happens. We get lots of threats before it happens, threats that it's going to happen, and then it happens, and then we have the aftermath, all in a single chapter. It's very tiny, and that's part of why I wanted to talk about Cal, is because it's very self-contained, and it kind of covers what is, in this society, potentially the worst thing possible to happen to a guy. And these books are binary, and so I'm not worrying about there being kinds of guys who don't have balls and can't be castrated. We're currently worried about the kind that can, because that's what happens to Cal.
So there's some context here where I just wanted to point out there is a lot that happens to Cal. He's kidnapped, he's tortured in general, for information, and also just because they had the opportunity. And then also the castration. We are specifically focusing on the castration because that's really what we get descriptions and background and context for, and that's the shape of the threats that he gets. But we are fully aware that his experience was more than just that.
Oh yeah, and part of the torture and thing is like psychological torture around, oh, we're going to do this to you, and we're going to kill your kids, so you're not going to have any heirs because you can't make any more. And he has 5 kids, so them threatening that once he's castrated, he might not be able to have an heir if he already has 5 sons.
Like, they're literally just saying, hey, we're going to kill your entire family, good luck.
Yeah. We're gonna kill your family and metaphorically salt the earth, so like you can't redo it. He's beaten and threatened, and then
something I'm just kind of thinking about, like, because of the way this world is set up, this is not. Sorry, I paused because Haku was just very loud running, and I might leave that in. That was very thunderous. I don't know what she was doing. I assume she's having fun. I just want to kind of say contextually, this book is a fantasy book. It's not a sci-fi book. So medically, and what's the word I'm looking for? Technologically.
Hormonally? Or
if you don't have the ability to have children, just don't have children in this scenario. So this is it.
Right. This is medieval plus magic.
setup. And so like that's it. Like if as a guy in this setup, if you can't have kids, that's it. You just can't have kids and you just don't have an heir. And this is set up where line of succession is genetic. That is part of this world. Mm-hmm. And so you can't just, oh, well, I adopted this person. Like that doesn't count. Especially because this is a fantasy setting with magic. And so there are magical means, I believe, that we kind of get a hint of in other books. There are magical means to actually test if someone is your heir. So you can't just... That's not part of this book. I believe it shows up later, without spoiling things for Robin.
I haven't read these in a decade, so...
There are magical ways to test if someone is your heir, and so it is not good enough to just adopt a child and then raise them as your heir, because if anyone literally ever questions them, they're gonna fail those tests. And so... It's funny because there are modern workarounds that we have. Like you can adopt a person and have them be your child in all ways other than medically. We have surgeries that can fix it. We have other modern medical things, and every single avenue for that is cut out by these books very intentionally, I would say. Like it is set up in a world where this is important, and it's important not generically, but that's all I'm going to say about that.
I mean, minor digression building off of that, like, also, like, part of the context for him being super worried about, being castrated and not having an heir is that one of his brothers was killed at the start of this whole thing, like, last fall. So he's also worried not just about him not having an heir for himself, but him not being an heir for his father. So he's got, like, a lot of worries.
Can we segue from that into his father's reaction?
Sure, that's actually what I was about to say next. His, the language in here is very oblique. They refer to his manhood, they refer to him being injured down there. They have, like, a lot of indirect references. And then we finally get for certain exactly what was done to him, kind of, when, his father refers to, how he'll serve the bastard's balls to him on toast. Being the bastard in question being the head person who ordered the honey cat, implicitly. Yeah. The honey cat. Yeah, the head of the person who gave the orders that led to this happening to Cal. But the language is very oblique, and it's not graphic. Like, if you didn't know that this is a thing, it'd be like, well, they're threatening to kill his family, and something got cut off, maybe? Like, it's...
Yeah. I will say, when I was a kid reading these books for the first time, and full disclosure, I read these books... I was a very early reader, and I read these books not quite as they came out, but very close. I was probably 3 or 4 reading this book, and that is not an exaggeration at all. I did not know what they were talking about, and I think I figured it out somewhere in middle school. But by that point, I had read these books, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times, more than that. 4 or 5 that I can directly remember. And, like, the language is obscure enough. And we'll probably talk about this in our wrap-up a little bit, too. But the language surrounding it is obscure enough where if you don't have context for it, you're not going to jump to that. It's not traumatizing to read, even a little bit. But if you are old enough to figure out what it's talking about, then it's very clear and very, very, not explicit, but very heavily implicit. It's heavily implicit, and it's very consistent. Like, once you know what it's talking about, there's no obscurity at all. It's just very clear. But it was good because it's a passage where potentially, especially if you have balls, it might be traumatizing. It could very easily have been traumatizing to read, but I don't think that this passage would be.
Nah, it would be probably like, again, neither of us have those, so it's probably like super cringy to read. If it's like, that could happen to me. But
still, the language around it kind of protects the reader without obscuring what is happening. Like, once you know, it makes total sense, and there's nothing, there's nothing obscure about it anymore. But you have to it's kind of one of those, like, it's not a catch-22, but if it were a problem, it would be, where it's almost like you have to know for it to matter, but if you don't know, then the scene is still a torture scene and it's fine, but it's not very traumatizing. It's just very well done, I think.
Though it is psychological torture, and if you're counting the torture as being the castration, then okay, it is a torture scene. But so I read the chapter and I thought, oh yeah, he totally got tortured in that. And then I skimmed over the chapter once I knew that we were going to read this segment, and I'm like, oh, never mind. No, they actually didn't. There was psychological torture. There was some, like, inappropriate hand placement. Like, it doesn't say specifically.
Yeah, there's a lot of just implied that this is happening to him without anything, again, like, without anything traumatic to read.
Like, I can't swear that he actually got physically tortured, but psychologically, as we said up front, he's getting all kinds of threats about his family, and they live very far away, like on the other side of mountains, so for his family to be threatened,
well, there's a duality there,
and him to believe it, like, it implies both, wait, that far away
and also
isn't safe
you can't
enough.
get there to stop it. It's both. It's this weird, like, I thought they were safe.
We're already over there,
and I can't do anything about it. And it's just a very, I think it's a very well written scene.
It could almost, like, it'd be an extremely short story, but, like, this chapter alone would be a complete well done short story.
Huh? Yeah.
It's totally self-contained. You have enough to say what's going on, and, like, this, like, it doesn't need to, like, it's in a very good book, but this chapter, I think, could stand alone by itself as, like, this little scene of this thing happening, because, like, even his rescue is all in this one chapter, and the reaction and, like, the reassurance from his dad of, like, your worth to me is not that you can make more kids. That's not your worth to me. They took from you the thing we can totally do without. It'll be totally fine. Like, I do not think any less of you. And given, like, the implied cultural context by, like, this being, like, vaguely Middle Ages Europe, I think it's very, very important that gets explicitly said.
And like I said, like, not just vaguely medieval Europe, but medieval magical Europe, where they can magically verify that you have a lineage. And for the fact that his father, to say to his current, I think he has one more sibling who's still alive, but, like, his eldest, his heir, to say, hey, the only thing that doesn't matter to me about you as a person is that you can still be my heir and have heirs of your own. Like, literally everything about you as a human being is more important to me than that. That is
it's a very strong message.
An extremely strong message. And it is a very interesting, I think, juxtaposition to, like this isn't something, so, like, there's a lot of cultural context that is written in and part of the series, but also, like, this, even with all of that cultural context and weight to this thing, this is not a book where people go around saying, like, I'm trying to think of how to word this. It's in the text. It's very clearly structured. It's very well put together. It makes a lot of sense. It's very consistent. It's culturally consistent across multiple different places and events and things like that. And even I would go as far as to say societies eventually when we get to the other books. But at the same time, this is not a book where people walk around saying, I'm the heir, so here are my powers. Like, it's very just built into the world in a very smooth way. It's not the focal point of everything.
And again, I can't speak to the later books yet because I think I read them once, 10 years ago. I am not the one who rereads this series. But we'll get there.
I've read the series a lot.
Alright, here we have our second topic for the episode. Our first topic for our main character, Paksenarrion. This is the discussion of her trip to alert Duke Phelan of the garrison's capture. And she is the sole survivor of that trip where she started out with 2 other people.
So, this is kind of, there's a lot that we could talk about with regards to this thing, but again, kind of like our first topic, we're focusing in on one aspect of it. So a lot of this trip that they're going on, they spend, call it a trip. It's really they're fleeing from the enemy, and they're trying to bring information. So it's not a trip, but
it's not a jaunt.
It's not a jaunt, right? But a lot of it they spend very tired, very hungry, very cold, being hunted literally by the people that they are trying to bring warning about. They're being hunted potentially by an army. But all of that, the three of them are together. They're working through and taking care of injuries, and they're, keeping each other alive, but they're in it together. The thing that we wanted to focus on was right at the end, right as they're almost to the keep, right as they almost made it, they actually get attacked by, I think, bandits, and they get separated, and Kanna and Sabin don't make it, but Pax does. And it's almost, from a trauma standpoint, it's almost worse that way, because they were so close, and they were together the entire way, and they almost did it, and then all of a sudden, it's just Pax, and she's the only one who actually makes it. And so she made it, and they delivered the message, and they rescued the troops, and they saved the day later in the book. But in the moment, she made it all the way with her two best friends, and then she lost them. Right as they were almost there.
And also, they both were alive when they were found, too.
Oh, yeah.
Sabin was comatose because of a wound to the head. Kanna was too injured to live, but was able to talk to the people who were rescuing them. And I think it sounds like she might have been, with the surgeons or medics or whatever for a bit before she died. She was able to will her her medallion of Gerd to Pax before dying. So it's not like
they just died in captivity and then Pax never saw them again. It's like, no, they were rescued and straight up did not make it, and she also didn't get to say goodbye still.
Yeah.
There's just a lot that she kind of goes through with that.
And I think she might have also, I don't remember whether this was explicit in the text or not, but because she rode with the rescuing troops to go free the garrison, basically because she rode with them, she then wasn't with the people who found Sabin and Kanna. And I don't know if they talk about that was explicitly said. Okay. Yeah. So because she went to go rescue and do more things to complete the mission. So she alerted them, and then now she went to go help complete this rescue. Because of that, she doesn't get to say goodbye, and she could have said goodbye to Kanna.
And also, with that, the surgeons and the Duke gave her an option to stay behind and heal. And she said, no, I want to be part of the next step. So if it comes to well, there's definitely this implication that, well, if I had just said no, or if I had just said yes, and if I had taken the rest that was being offered, then I would have seen them again, at least a little bit. And so it's just a lot.
So she's torn between finishing the mission that she thought that they had already died to make happen. And by trying to complete what she thought they had already died for, she missed them actually dying.
And then we also have, on top of this whole survivor's guilt that she has, she also feels it's almost written as though she doesn't feel guilty, but she thinks that she should feel guilty because Sabin had offered to have sex with her or asked her about it. I think it was just once. And she turned him down, and that impacted their friendship in 0 ways, which was great. That is the correct way that should happen. But also, it was something that she knew he wanted, and so then, when she died, she basically
he died, but yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, when he died, she looked at it and said, well, I couldn't even, he's gone, and I couldn't even give him this thing that he wanted. And the way it's handled in the book, their Sergeant Stammel, I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah, Sergeant. She's talking to him about this, and he basically looks at her and says, that's not something that you should even be considering, because Sabin didn't think any less of you for it. He didn't regret anything. He wasn't upset. He wasn't angry with you. He had, you guys were just friends, and the fact that you didn't have this other relationship on top of that is fine. And also, you should not have bedded him out of guilt. That's not how that works, and that's not healthy, and that's not something that you should have been doing anyway. And that is a very, very, very good and correct and accurate way that should be handled. And I think it's also important to note that this is not a female sergeant. This is a male sergeant written in a book where I don't think that it's even men and women, and they actually specifically talk about the ratios.
It's about 1/4 women.
1/4 to 1/3. I think her company at one point is, or no, her cohort at one point is 1/3.
Well, the company as a whole is 1/4.
Yeah.
That is explicitly stated after they get the northern troops, and so she's thinking a lot about the numbers.
Yeah. But as far as like named characters go, we don't have 0 women. Like this book passes the Bechdel test with flying colors everywhere. Even with there being an explicit male to female ratio that's discussed. And with all of that, this is a female sergeant telling her this is a male sergeant telling her, the female recruit, no, you didn't owe him this. And also, if you had done this out of a feeling of obligation, it would have cheapened it anyway. And Sabin doesn't resent you, and it's okay. And also, hey, by the way, you're going through PTSD and survivor's guilt, and I know that as your superior officer, and you need to recognize that, and it's okay. And then there's a couple of like explicit, like contextual things that he uses as examples for why she should absolutely know that Sabin wasn't upset about it. But also just like, it's very explicit and supported in the text, and it's just very well written.
Yeah. And also, I don't think survivor's guilt is used explicitly as a term. PTSD definitely is not, because that's a very modern term, but like...
No, it's way more descriptive than that, but I think Stammel does say, like, you feel guilty because you're the only one. Like, they both died. Right. Like, he explicitly describes it. I'm just...
Oh, sure. No, that's definitely what they're talking about. Yeah. And she also has a lot of, like, if she hadn't run, then maybe they would have all made it. And it's like, no, you wouldn't have. And her superior officer is very clear on that, too. Like, hey, you don't know that. And also this way, someone got the message to the Duke, which was the goal. You did your job. Quit beating yourself up for doing your job. And it wasn't, and it's not even like, let it go. It doesn't matter. It's, hey, allow yourself to heal. You did it. You're the only one that survived. It's okay. Like, no one is upset at you or anything, least of all your friends. And then, again, here's why. Here's some explicit examples of them in their final moments being okay with you and with what you did. And it's very good. I think it's a very good way of writing it so that her trauma is kind of both validated, but also pushed on the road to healing. And also, at the same time, there's a rejection of a lot of toxic things that can come with that. And it's explicit rejection. It's not just that they don't talk about it or she doesn't deal with it. Like, no, she looks it directly in the face and has somebody who she respects look at her and say, hey, that's not something that you need to handle. And it gives her kind of a, like, you don't need to take that on.
Yeah, but it gives her a literal reason to reject it, because the person telling it to her is her superior officer. It's somebody she respects. And also, it is another guy, which in context for this does matter.
Yeah. Because it's not like a woman telling her, oh, you don't need to bother with whether some man would have wanted to sleep with you.
Exactly.
It's a guy saying, like, hey, it didn't hurt your friendship.
And if it had
impact it.
And if it had, that would have been awful on him, so you can relax anyway. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which is very, very good.
And also, it's not like this book pretends that, like, everybody's totally fine and men and women, like, totally get together with no problems. Our next topic is going to have that.
Yeah.
But it does very clearly have, like, characters who are good about this and characters who are not.
Mm-hmm.
There's some, like, throwaway characters who are from a different company and basically ask, like, a whole string of, like, well, what do you mean women can fight? Why are there so many of you? Like, what's going on? Like, we have that, but it doesn't I'm glad that the book doesn't inundate us with that kind of, like, stressful stuff. With, like, yeah. I appreciate how the book acknowledges but is not permeated by, like, ambient misogyny. That's nice. Alright, we have Paksenarrion's assault and attempted rape.
Yeah. So I just want to, real quick before we get into this, I'm reiterating just in case people don't read our show notes all the time. This, even before we start talking, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, this has explicit talk about physical assault, attempted sexual assault, descriptions of physical and sexual injuries, and also drugging and I'm trying to think if there's any more that I know we're going to cover.
Like, we hope you join us for this segment, but
also
if
we
not,
understand.
Take care of ourselves and catch us for the wrap up.
Yeah.
Or take care of yourselves and catch us for the wrap up.
Take care of ourselves too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so just in case you didn't look at the show notes, this is not going to be a fun one to listen to if you have any reason to avoid or not be a part of any of those discussions. And if there's any more content warnings that we need, I will put them also in the show notes, but those are the ones that I'll already, ahead of our actual discussion, I know we're going to cover.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to talk about the way the text is presented at different levels first, or do we want to just literally go down our...
I first want to talk about what is explicitly in the text, then talk about what is heavily, heavily implied, and we're like 99% sure. And then if we have anything where we're pretty sure, but it isn't in there, like, kind of handle it that way.
Okay. All right. You want to start with explicit and I'll go to implicit?
Sure. So what is explicitly in the text is that Pax is in a cell, and also the switch to the scene is extremely abrupt. It jumps over the events and is just the aftermath. So she doesn't quite wake up in a cell. We join her awake in a cell, and she is hurt. She doesn't quite know how hurt she is. And Stammel comes to see her, and he's talking at first like she did something, and she's like, wait, no, I'm the one who was attacked. And basically, what we have from the text is someone attempted to rape her. Corin and Steffi hurt her. Steffi definitely hurt her. He tried to make her sleep with him, and she refused him, and then he hurt her. And someone was placed on lookout, and Corin was also there, and it's not really clear. No one directly witnessed and can remember and was willing to say exactly what Corin did. But the end result is that Pax was almost raped, was assaulted so badly that they had to do an examination in order to figure out whether or not she'd technically been raped because she was so injured.
And also, quick note here, the reason that she's not sure how injured she is because everything hurts.
Right. Yeah.
Like, it's literally a case of overstimulus by pain where it all hurts and she can kind of pinpoint things, but like she's also not certain if her ribs are broken. It's just that breathing is difficult. It's kind of one of those.
Yeah. So she is hurt all over, and there is concern over whether she was hurt in the very specific way that is rape, but no matter what, there was an attempted sexual assault, there was completed physical assault. And I would say, yeah, like the hairline between was she sexually assaulted but not technically raped? Like, I'm not super interested in that distinction, and luckily the book isn't either.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, like, that's not just a we don't care thing. Like, the book also does not care.
It's not
like,
saying, it's not better for her attackers that she wasn't actually raped. It's just better for her that she wasn't technically raped.
Yes.
All right, did you want to talk about the implicit stuff?
Yeah, so that's what we kind of get as written down as, and I do want a quick note before I move on to implicit. Explicitly in the text, it's not that those things are what we know happened. It's, we kind of watch other people piece together the scene. And so the things that Robin just said are things that the officers and the other people who are in charge of her well-being and of investigating this, those are things that they think and notice and are told and understand. And so it's 100% not the whole story, but also, like, it's not written to be believed as the whole story. You very much watch it as an investigation that is happening. And I think it's an important distinction. So implicit in the text is that Steffi was probably not actually the rapist here, or attempted rapist. Explicitly in the text, we do have that he grabs Pax by the arm and kind of pushes her down on a bed and is trying to talk her into sleeping with him. She says no. And then everything else that we hear about the scene is from Corin. And we have implicit and a little bit of physical injury explicit reasons to think that Corin is the one who beat her. Corin is the one who hit her. Corin is the one who broke ribs. Corin is also the one who told, not even just told Steffi what to say, but Corin is the one who gave Steffi's initial account for him. Literally just him talking and telling Steffi to nod. And we also have explicit text confirmation that Steffi was drugged. So implicit in the text, with all of those things that are actually in there, that are actually explicitly written in there, we have implicit in the text that Steffi was drugged. When I tried to get Pax to sleep with him, and she said no, and then Corin said, no, actually, we're gonna hurt you, and beat her, potentially attempted to rape her, and then lied about all of it.
It's not potential that someone tried, it is just potential as to whether it was Steffi or Corin.
Right, exactly. And also, explicitly in the text, we do get that by the time somebody showed up and kind of officers were on the scene and kind of de-escalating is the wrong word. I don't have a better word.
Yeah, it definitely isn't de-escalation, because they thought that she was, they broke it up.
There we go. Broke up the scene. By the time we have officers there who broke up the scene, Steffi cannot sit up straight or really talk. But, and that's actually the reason that Pax was thrown in the cell in the first place, is because he couldn't, like, give testimony for himself. And so when Corin says, well, yeah, she did this to him, it's taken at face value, just because he literally can't defend himself or talk for himself or anything. And they assume at the time it's because Pax beat him so badly that he can't talk. But then he essentially doesn't have a scratch on him when they actually look later. And so we kind of get all of this where it pieces together where Steffi was drugged. Corin either set it up and drugged Steffi or took advantage of the scene to... Stop, girls. I need not cat yowling in the background. I'll fuzz them. And then, so Corin either engineered the scene or took advantage of the scene to hurt Pax on purpose.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty heavy implication. And the thing is, like, we don't know who, well, we don't know at the time. Or we don't know in this book. We do actually eventually find out, which...
Don't tell me.
I won't tell you who, but this is not a mystery forever. We do get the setup here that Corin took full advantage of this and just hurt her.
Yeah. So one of the things is because Steffi couldn't, as we said, like walk, he was like falling over because he was drugged. They thought Pax heard him, and Stammel asks, like, hey, if it had been this morning and you said Pax has this story and Corin has this story, who would we listen to? And whoever he was talking to was like, well, Pax, obviously. And they're like, oh, but it's this thing. And Stammel's like, nah, we would believe Pax.
Like, we know that Pax is more trustworthy. We have had problems with Corin since he joined. Like, Steffi isn't the one even giving really a testimony here. Steffi doesn't remember anything. Like, yeah.
And so Stammel has to, like, fight the hierarchy and, like, pull strings and not quite pull rank, but do, like, everything. Because he can't pull rank because he's trying to get his higher-ups to do stuff. But, like, everything short of that to get this to happen.
And by this, we mean an investigation more beyond Pax beat up a corporal. To be clear.
Because the investigation was going to be, how much are we going to punish Pax for doing this? And he turned the investigation into what happened, who did what. There were witnesses, totally. And it was interesting, the use of the term witness, because it was witness not to the event, but witness to the injuries.
Oh, yeah.
And so looking at the injuries and at the physical evidence, the witnesses looked at it, and then they were witnesses to everyone's statements about what happened, and then they put that together, and then they had a judgment, and based on the judgment from the witnesses, then we get Corin, Steffi, and Jens. Jens was the one watching the door to say if any superiors were coming.
Jens is Corin's henchman, essentially. And that's not just in this scene, just in general. He's the minion to Jens's instigator. And Jens is not a good henchman in this scene, because when they said, hey, what did he tell you? He literally says, oh, well, Corin told me to go look out for the officers and tell him if they were coming. Like, okay, dude. Well,
like, Jens is
not a good accomplice. Which
he's
is
almost
good for
a
Pax.
mook. He's almost a mook. He's so bad at being a henchman.
Yeah.
And then
once his pure just like confusion at, well, why would you even ask me this? Of course it was just as very funny to me.
So trying to keep this as a discussion and not just a recap. There's so much to recap. We could talk about it forever.
It's hard because we're honestly right now, we're not just recapping, because there's so much to the way that this whole scene is handled, where there's so much that's implied. And there's so much that you
even us saying what happened is drawing conclusions about the text, because so much of this is implicit.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say is going to the trial and the punishment. I found the punishment to be very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because the punishment for Jens is that they're all lashed. Steffi the least, and then Corin got 40 lashes. No, Steffi was sent elsewhere Jens got lashed. Corin got 40 lashes. And then Jens's head was shaved, and Corin was shaved with all of his hair. Yeah, Tanisi Turin. He was completely shaven like a newborn lamb or something. That's, how it is in the books. Yeah, and so you have this interesting interplay with Pax being kind of traumatized again by watching the punishment and trying to figure out how to deal with that. Like, the text doesn't spend a ton of time on it, but it does acknowledge that, like, it's okay for her to feel badly and not be okay with watching this punishment happen. She can look away. There would be something wrong with her if she did like it.
Yeah. They very much have an attitude of the punishment is the deterrent for other people to do the same thing. And also building off of that, there's more than just, there's validation for her being uncomfortable or not okay for more than just the other punishment. There is also explicit in the text, the guards and other people in charge, but the guards holding her there, her personal, the people keeping her from running away, in theory, when they're going over, the witnesses are going over descriptions of injuries, that is rough for Pax. It talks in the book about her, just as they're saying her injuries, as they're listing them off, she feels them like it's happening to her again. And her guards actually walk her through it and essentially say, like, hey, this is affecting you. Don't listen to this. You aren't the one who needs to hear this. You just need to be present because it's a defense of you, but also like you're kind of on trial a little bit because we're seeing what happened, but also, hey, that hurt you, so look out the window, don't listen. Count. I think one of the guards actually says, like, instead of listening to that, try counting to 100 or something, like, just block it out because we can tell that this is traumatic for you, just almost like reliving it. And that's very, it's given a lot of weight and a lot of care, and we'll talk about that later. And it's care not just for the reader, it's care for the person who's survived the trauma in the book, which I can't think of a single book that we've read so far or talked about reading or have on our list. And I think Elizabeth Moon as an author does this in a couple of the books that I have kind of set up as like options for us to read, but I can't think of another author who so explicitly has the character given that level of on-screen care about their trauma without it just being backstory somehow. Generally speaking, like, Elizabeth Moon does this very, very good, interesting thing where it's all in the book, but it's in the book as aftermath, so the reader is not experiencing it, but the character is reliving it, and then the character is seen to be given care to get through it. And it's just a lot of books, even with things like trauma and physical injury and things like that, don't go to that level. So I just think that's important to note.
All right, for our wrap up, for our first item, which was Cal Halverick, Minor Character Spotlight, what do you think the gratuity rating is?
It's either mild or moderate.
I was going to say it alternates between mild and off-screen.
For the actual trauma that we talked about is pretty difficult to do. Yeah.
It's very well done. Delicately handled, very precise language.
Delicately handled sounds like a joke, and I know it's not.
That's all to say about that. All right, so for Pax's
so let's just say survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt. All right, so Pax, survivor's guilt. I think it's moderate. There's like a discussion, but it's not the kind of thing.
Here's the only reason that I'm wondering if it's legitimately moderate or if it's severe. Pax.
It might be triggering for someone who has a similar thing.
But more than that, the fact that she is dealing with it for so long, because I think it might be one of those again where the actual event is over really super quick, but she's dealing with it for like the rest of the book. Actually, for that matter, I'm going to go ahead and say, I know you don't know this yet, but she's dealing with it into the next book a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's severe just because of the duration and because of how much it's...
Even if we just consider how much it's in this book, you think it's still severe?
It goes for the rest of the book.
Because I agree.
Even if you just consider it being in this book.
That's true.
It is...
Even at like the very, very end of the book, she's thinking about it again. I think as an actual trauma, the way it's depicted, it's not severe, but I think it
it is one of those that just goes on and on and on and on and on.
So let's say moderate, but sustained.
Well, we don't have a category for sustained. Okay, let's just go. All right, we can go ahead and just say moderate. Moderate, but also like...
Moderate, but a lot of it.
Moderate, but also like, hey,
moderate.
if you struggle with survivor's guilt, this might be cathartic and it might be awful. So heads up. Yeah, that'll totally depend on your personal experience, so...
We're sorry, we can't predict that for you. I'm not going to
try.
So then we have the assault on Pax.
This is severe. Full stop.
This is severe. It's a very interesting mix of off-screen and severe.
That's fair. But even just descriptive language used kicks it up to severe. This is gonna be a fun one to
It's off-screen. It's off-screen, it is severe, and it is specifically not torture porn, which is a delicate balance that was handled very well. We have whether Cal's trauma is it's irrelevant. It is very interesting, but it is irrelevant.
I'm gonna say it's not irrelevant. I think it's interchangeable because
you think it's interchangeable?
The Halvericks.
Okay.
Well, I was gonna say the Halvericks needed something to be that committed because the Duke was
they already had something happen to their other son, as we do talk about in this segment. Like, they were already together. This intensified an already intense bond, and there are hints in the text of there being some other, even more unspoken reason for them to be on the side of Duke Phelan.
Okay. All right. Irrelevant. Sorry, Cal. Although, okay, so I do want to quickly note because of the things that we talked about, plot-wise, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant to the plot.
It is irrelevant to the plot.
But it's... Yes.
I think it makes it a better book.
I think book-wise, it was very, very good. But yeah, plot-wise, it was irrelevant.
It would make... And I did say in our short segment, just in case anyone, skipped the segment but is here for the wrap-up, this particular chapter would make an amazing short story. It wouldn't even need to be lengthened. It could just be, like, a very short story in the middle, like, on the internet or in some other book. Like, it's a standalone, contained thing that has all of the info it needs.
If Elizabeth Moon did fan fiction of her own work...
This would, yes. Yeah, if she did fan fiction of her own work, this could be fan fiction of her work.
And it's just very
as a standalone chapter. But that also contributes to its ability to be plot-wise irrelevant. All right,
Survivor's Guilt. This is
Pax's Survivor's Guilt.
I'm going to argue that this is integral.
I was going to argue that it's interchangeable. So I was going to argue that it is interchangeable because we already had other events that would have caused and have already caused similar survivor's guilt. She's literally in an army. Like, there's
okay, can I make an argument for it being...
I was going to say, I see it as inevitable that she's going to have survivor's guilt.
But it's not the survivor's guilt that is the thing that I'm saying is integral.
Okay. Sure. All right.
So...
And you can't pull from what's in books 2 and 3. You got to stick to this one.
I'm sticking to this one. So... Although, okay, to be fair... books 2 and 3 would not have happened without this particular thing happening to her.
That's true. They would have been...
I'm trying to say this without spoilers.
Yeah.
Tell me if you think this is a spoiler. For her to leave the company, she can't have friends still in it like that.
That's a spoiler because that's not in this book.
No, yeah, it is.
No, she's still in the company at the end of this book. Yeah, she hasn't left the company.
Oh.
So, arguing whether it's integral to this plot...
Okay, sure. No, we can't take a trilogy and say... We can't take a trilogy and say... Okay, here's the thing. Okay, spoiler-free, books 2 and 3 would not have happened if she still had friends that were her best friends alive in the company. There would be no plot.
All right, so now
there are multiple specific events in books 2 and 3 that quite literally tie back to this specific trauma, and she as a character would not develop and exist the way she does without this happening to her.
My counter is that's going to be the case for any series. Things you did in book one, while they might not have been set in stone in how you did book one, will carry through, and then they become harder to change.
Yes, but it's not that simple for this one.
Okay, so let's go with, I haven't read these in 10 to 15 years. I only vaguely remember. And so it is not integral to the plot
but
of
it is,
this.
Though.
Hold up. Ah. It is not integral to the plot of this book, but your argument could be that the point of this series would have to be different if this weren't in there. Because my hard counter to whether it had to be integral is, what if she had just never really made very many friends in the company?
Then she wouldn't have a loss. Yes, she did. She did have to lose them.
Okay. All right.
That's the thing, is like, she absolutely had to lose them.
Okay. Trying to get this to like...
Okay. All right. In this book...
It's interchangeable.
No, it's not. Okay.
So, all right. Okay, let me argue it this way.
It's just not.
It's so...
But I can't tell you why without spoilers. Like, it's so not. So,
to me, practically speaking, only having read this book, because I only remember, like, 2 things from later, and none of them related to this, it is integral that she has survivor's guilt, because she would be magically lucky to escape the plot of this book.
See, the survivor's guilt is not the part that I think is integral. It's literally everything else.
I understand that. Okay, so Nick, I'm trying to help us talk about the spoiler-free, and when the title for this topic is survivor's guilt, and you're like, wait, I want to talk about everything but survivor's guilt.
Well, no, I don't want to talk about everything else. I just want to say that, like, the point of the trauma was not the guilt, but the trauma had to happen. That's all I'm saying. I don't know how to say that without...
Okay, can I attempt without you cutting it off partway through? Okay, so, to me, just with this book, the survivor's guilt is integral to the plot. Exactly who was lost could be interchangeable. The number could have been different. It didn't have to be from this particular event that has her leave the company physically and be in danger. But you are arguing that if you didn't have this, the rest of the series wouldn't happen and wouldn't make sense. And so I'll go ahead and grant you that this may heavily impact the rest of the series, and thus is integral to the story arc. I'll go ahead and grant you that, because I don't remember. But, so that, I would say that she has survivor's guilt is integral to the plot, because you would have a very different war book if she managed to get away without survivor's guilt. And then that's strengthened when you argue that everything but the actual survivor's guilt is integral to the overall arc. So we can go ahead and settle on integral, even if we disagree about which part is integral.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah, because I just don't know how to make my argument for why I think it's integral without...
Yeah, it's okay. You don't know how to make a spoiler-free argument, but if I think one half of it is integral and you think the other half is integral... That's fine. Then
that's cool.
It's okay.
I just don't think it's interchangeable because of a lot of reasons. Like, Elizabeth Moon is super good at layers to specific scenes. So, like, you'll have a scene... This is just a thing with this author. Like, you'll have a scene, and then, like, this piece of that scene is integral to the next chapter, but this other piece of that scene is integral to the next book, but this other piece of that scene is integral to chapter 2 of the third book. Like, there's just a lot of things like that, where there's a lot of that in this book, where it just builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And it's a thing that she does in a lot of her series that I've read, but especially this one, where something that at first glance looks really super minor, if you pull that thing away, the rest of it just falls apart.
Yeah.
And this thing is one of those things.
And I read books far more linearly and also piecemeal at the same time. And so I first default to assuming it's interchangeable, and then testing to see that. I first test if it's interchangeable.
Oh, yeah. But that's the thing is, like, if you're only looking at, well, other things could cause survivor's guilt, like, yeah, absolutely. But those other things wouldn't have all of the nuances and all of the implications that this particular thing had. And yeah, sure, you could build in, like, 17 reasons for those other things to exist. But at that point, you're just writing a different book, which is why I think it's integral.
Okay, then. So then I don't know how to get I don't know how to get a short version of this conversation. But yes, I see what you're saying, and I think we can move on.
That's my job.
Yep. Yeah, that's why it's your job.
Okay.
Now we have the assault.
This is also integral.
Yeah, this is definitely integral. Even though it doesn't come back in this book, I recognize this from other things. I know the feeling of we have set up a big bad and they will return.
I've read TV tropes enough to know that
I was going to say, Tamora Pierce did this twice in one of her series. Like, yeah. And with someone else who started with a K as well. But anyway, no. I don't know if you cut that or not. But
I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely recognize the feeling of we have set up something that's going to come back to bite her later. Someone hates her.
I'm sorry. I'm trying not to laugh because
so I would argue,
I know what happens, and it's just hearing your sentence out of context is highly entertaining to me. It's not wrong, but it's also very funny. Anyways,
so I would argue that it's integral to this plot. I recognize how, if done well, it could be integral to the story moving forward. I trust that it will be. I vaguely remember that it is. Some of the details might be interchangeable, but I think they're very informative, so I'm going to go ahead and say that this thing is integral.
And I would also argue that, like, some of the details might be interchangeable. It could have been talked about differently, but I think for the way the author wanted the reader to experience it, I don't think the details were really interchangeable. Yeah. Like, they're so specific in a way that protects the reader, and we'll get to that literally with our next thing, but, like, yeah. I mean, yeah, you could have been less good about how you did the scene, but also
no, this is definitely integral in a different way than the other thing. All right, moving on to Were Things Treated with Care, talking about Cal Halverick.
Yes. Absolutely.
So much care. So
full care.
So much tender, taking lots and lots of care with language and exactly what's going on. So much so that very young Nicole did not know what was going on.
Oh yeah, to be fair, like I did say in the segment, I was probably 3 or 4 reading this book, so me not knowing what was going on in the scene is fair, and if I did know what was going on, that might even be a little bit concerning with how obscure the language around it is.
It would have been more worrying if you'd known what was going on when you read it that young.
Okay, survivor's guilt. I would argue this is treated with enough care.
Yeah, like,
it's not just straight up treated with care.
There's some
as much as the others.
I don't want to use the term wallowing. I'm going to say reoccurring. There's a lot of reoccurring intrusive thoughts with this, and that kind of makes it be enough care. Yeah, it's not overwhelming. It's not inundating, but it is repetitive.
Yes,
in a very purposeful way that doesn't drag in the book.
Oh no,
but it's repetitive because it keeps being on her mind that this thing happened.
Yep, over and over and over and over and over forever.
Yeah,
not forever. She does not forever, but for a long time.
Forever's, the end of
forever
the book,
as far
at
least. As the book is concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. The assault was definite. This is a weird one because I am torn between enough and just full on yes.
I'm gonna go with yes because I say it is treated with care, even to the point of you have something where someone tells her tells her a technique for not having to listen to all of the discussion that's happening, and so then the reader gets the text of someone telling her how to not have to listen to it rather than the reader having to listen to all of it. Like, even that is just so well done.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have a lot of kind of like cutaways to her reaction.
Mm-hmm. And then you kind of flash back to like the convo, but you know that you missed a lot of it, and it's like you as a reader never feel like you don't know what's going on, but also you are 100% not being, you're not having it inflicted on you in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Again, we think this was, I think it was definitely, it's definitely treated with care. Whether or not it feels like just enough care, I think is going to depend on what baggage a reader has coming into it. But I think it has a shot at straight up being treated with care. Your mileage may vary, but yeah, it is at minimum enough. All right, moving on to the point of view for Cal. It stays on him. Yeah, it's pretty much on him. His consciousness is going in and out, so the point of view kind of goes in and out, and it does it in this really, really, it does it in this very intelligent way, this very interesting way that, again, I really like this chapter.
I'm gonna submit that the aftermath was Cal and his dad. Cal and the Halverick. Because the Halverick gets a particular mail parcel.
Well, it's him telling, it's just him telling Cal about it. It's not us seeing.
No, we do get the scene of him and the Duke being in the tent.
Wait, we do?
Yeah, and we get the Duke's reaction to the Halverick's reaction. Like, we do get other people reacting to this thing happening. We do get that. But as far as the actual trauma itself, we only get Cal. But then the aftermath, we get Cal and Cal talking to his dad and his dad talking to the Duke and the Duke being circumspect with other people. Like, we do have other people's kind of reaction to it, which is not a bad thing in this case. The way it was handled was beautiful.
Nah, I'm looking at the text. The Duke is in the tent with him while he has the Duke leave the tent while the surgeon's taking care of him.
That's not the part I'm talking about. I'm talking about the part before they even go rescue him.
Are you sure? Then that would mean stuff happened out of order. No. Everything. Okay, I'm looking at the text.
Okay.
They have that he's captured, and they have not received a package of any kind. Then we have. So Pax is sent to help rescue him because he has been kidnapped, but nothing else has happened. Then
I would go get my book, but my cat is on my lap.
Then it happens, and then he is rescued. Like, this is all within a single chapter. That's part of what was so striking to me. Then they get back to camp, and then he sends the Duke out of the tent while the surgeon is working on him. The Duke comes back in, the Duke is outside the tent, and then his father bursts in and tells him that he knows what's going on and that he's still there and that he did receive that package. There's no separate scene where, like, the Duke and the father get it.
No.
I'm sorry.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's what you were saying.
You get No, that's 100% not what I'm saying. As an aftermath to what happened, we get the Duke's reaction, his father's reaction, and Cal's reaction.
Okay, sorry.
That's what I'm saying. We have we have three people who we have the aftermath.
I was focusing on point of view in an extremely literal way. We never leave Cal's point of view.
It's a third-person book.
We never
to be fair.
To me, we never got the Duke's inner monologue. We never got We don't get
anyone's
Cal's internal monologue.
It's a third-person book.
We get as close to... Sorry, not trying to digress. Just...
I mean, we get his dad... We get the Halverick literally saying his opinion and his reaction. We get the Duke... behaviorally, descriptively reacting. We get like as far as an aftermath is concerned, we have three people who have very clear stances.
We do get their reaction. Okay, so let's circle back. Now that I understand what you're saying, talking about point of view for what happened to Cal. All of the point of view stays with him, and so we get the reactions of people who are in the room with him, and by doing that, we get several people's reactions to what happened, varying from the people who helped rescue him to the Duke and his father after he has been rescued. And by doing that, I appreciated that the traveling point of view stayed with Cal. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But also it is important that we don't only ever know how Cal feels.
We do get point. His father saying specifically
we do get multiple
what's happening. Sorry, I had taken the term point of view way more literally than you were.
In a third-person book, I don't, because there's more than one way to point of view a third-person book.
So point of view, so for the point of view for the Survivor's Guild, it's pretty much Pax. Like, it's Pax and people she talks to, but it's mostly, like, what's going on in her head. And then for the assault, we don't, so I know you're saying it's a third-person book, but we get Pax's thoughts, like, all the time. And so I think it's an important contrast that we don't get.
We do also get Stanley.
No, right. Let me finish my sentence. I do think it's important that we don't get Steffi's or Corin's or Jen's thoughts. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so this...
actually, I would argue we don't get a point of view of the trauma.
No, we don't.
We only get point of view of the aftermath.
I should have been more clear. Yeah, we don't get anything for the actual trauma, and the aftermath is a mix of Stammel and Pax, and we don't get...
And I think also, I'm trying to remember wording-wise, if we get a little bit of Kolya.
Yeah, we might get some, like, ancillary people, but more to my point is that we just get it from...
We don't get the perpetrators at all. Yeah. Yep. And I do think we kind of pushed past to the aftermath. I think it is very important for this particular trauma. We don't actually have a point of view of the trauma because the way it is written with as much care as is taken, the actual trauma is not inflicted on the reader, even by just seeing someone go through it. And also, it's important to note, because this is part of why we look at point of view of the trauma, it's not that we just don't see it. No, we do see what is happening, and the victim here is not brushed aside, even.
We get the stuff that matters for figuring out how to deal with it and move on and punish, but we...
Yes, and we do, and we also get how Pax is feeling. Like, we do get that. But it is a very deliberate choice, I think, to not have there be an on-screen assault scene.
I'm very glad they didn't do that. All right. So, did you have an aspiring writer tip?
Aspiring writer tip. I'm trying to remember if we've said this one before, but I really want to just say, hey, it's completely possible to write horrific trauma scenes and handle them with care, with full care. That's a doable feat. Like, it's, and in a way that doesn't obscure any details. Like, for all of these scenes we're talking about, rereading them as adults, like, even the things that I didn't understand when I was 4, I fully know exactly what is happening in all of these scenes. But none of these scenes put me, the reader, through anything. 0%. And it's hard to do. It's hard to know how to do. It's achievable, and it really kind of... And now, to be fair, there are books where authors make different choices, and there are totally stories where authors choose to have your reader go through something as part of the experience. But also, like, a lot of what Elizabeth Moon chooses as trauma for her characters are incredibly visceral traumas. They're incredibly... just there. And this is a series that I read. Now, disclaimer, there are other things going on in my life at the time when I was 4 that meant that this was probably sheltered me from this a little bit, maybe contextually, but, like, also, I was 4. I read this series. I loved it. This is my favorite author. This is arguably my favorite series that exists, or at least my first favorite. And I read this as a 4-year-old, and I read these awful things, and I was fine. Because the language used was done in a way where it did not cheapen my experience of the story at all, but I was also not traumatized by this. Do I recommend reading this book to your 4-year-old? No. Don't read this to your 4-year-old. But also, like, she does this very, very, very well, and it's awesome. And it's achievable. And I would hold this book up as an example to literally anybody that ever tried to say that putting your audience through the trauma is inevitable. Like, no, it's not. You can make that choice, but it's a choice.
All right. So, favorite non-traumatic thing about the book. I don't know. I really liked. I mean, kind of when do you have a thing?
I do.
Okay, I'm thinking.
Well, actually, I have a favorite traumatic thing.
Nikki, favorite non-traumatic things. That's how this works.
I'm thinking. I got it. My favorite non-traumatic thing about this book is probably the relationship that Stamel has with his recruits. I love it. He is in charge. He is teaching them. He is a mentor. He's very strict, very stern, very in charge, which he has to be. He's teaching them fighting techniques. He's trying to keep them alive. He's also, while doing that, trying to keep them alive. But, like, he does not pull back on discipline even a little bit. He doesn't pull back on experiences that are necessary for them to learn things, reflexes, attitudes, behaviors that will keep them alive. He doesn't coddle them in any way, shape, or form, but they trust him. He has trained them so that he can trust them. He takes care of them. Even little things like there's actual battle scenes that we have, and he goes through, keeps track of his recruits, taps them on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you, back off the front lines because you're injured, you're tired, you're falling over, you've been out here for 2 hours, go get something to eat, swap out with," like, he is actively taking care of them. And it shows in how, even just how Pax, and a little bit we get of a couple other characters talking to him about things that they're going through. And he's very much, even just things like, there's the one tavern scene where he takes the recruits out to the tavern and he teaches them how to stay. These are, in medieval times, these are country kids, or some of them, going to go drink in a city with their first paycheck for the first time. And he makes sure they get home safe. And and it's not that he watches all of the recruits. He specifically pulls out the country kids who don't know how to stay safe in a city and makes sure that they get home safe. And the people that grew up in towns and know how to handle themselves, or grew up in a city and know how to handle themselves, he lets them go. And then when they don't come back in time, or they don't come back sober, or they don't come back with all their money, they're now taken to task for it because they should not have needed him to hold their hand. But, like, there's just this, if I had to pick a role model for being a leader of people, Stamel is up there. Just full stop in general, as a character, as a concept.
So my favorite non-traumatic thing about the book is kind of a weird one. How especially when, like, I do kind of remember where she's going to end up, like, later in the series. It is very humorous to have Pax be like, that cramp that totally stopped me from getting killed by a poisoned arrow? What? Have anything to do with this medallion on my chest? What? No. I'm not. No, I'm totally not divinely anything. No. No one's looking out for me. No.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, as an anecdote, her reaction makes sense, but yeah, it is very, very funny in juxtaposition to be like, What? Me? Special? Psh. She doesn't know she's the protagonist.
Right, yeah, that's basically what it boils down to. Her being like, me? Protagonist? No. Of course not. Couldn't be.
She is the anime character with pink hair that is like, nah.
Yeah.
It's funny.
All right. That's it for The Sheep Farmer's Daughter. And we will see you all in a fortnight for the next book, Divided Allegiance. All music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as HeartBeatArt Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at Books That Burn, all one word.
You can email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
You can leave us an iTunes review. This helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.